Hi, yes, hello, welcome. Today we are going to talk about a large urban legend iceberg. It's pretty big. Alright, this iceberg includes everything from digital legends, true legends, killers, hauntings, curses, mythical creatures, linguistic legends, whatever that is, I don't know, rituals, creepypastas, experiments, conspiracies, specific locations, other, and things that parents just made up to scare their kids. So if that sounds like fun to you, if that sounds like something you want to hear a bunch of different legends to spook your friends with, this might be the video for you. And keep in mind, a lot of these legends have like multiple different variations of them, and you probably heard a different version than the one I'm going to talk about. So don't get mad at me because I didn't talk about the hash-slinging slasher and I said that his walls will ooze orange slime instead of green slime like you remember. Alright, now starting tier 1 we have the ankle-slicing car thief. This is a legend that states that some evil doer, whether it be a car thief, mugger, killer, human trafficker, take your pick on why this person is bad, but they're a bad person, hides under cars and parking lots, and when people, they wait for unsuspecting people to come in and, put their stuff in their car and drive off and everything like that. They will slice their ankles to like make it so they can't run away and then do something to them. Enter evil act. Now some versions of the story say that this is just like a bad person doing bad things because they're a bad person. Others say that it's a gang initiation and no one really knows which. It really all depends on who you ask. But it is believed that the story started circulating in the 50s and it started somewhere around Detroit. The legend is mostly that, a legend, because I don't know if you ever try to crawl underneath a car. You don't exactly have the range of motion to like attack like that and then be quick about anything, because odds are whoever you just attack is going to start screaming for help and someone's going to come before you can get out of the car. However, someone did attack a woman in Salt Lake City like this back in 2008. Other than that, it's not real because it's not probable. No one's underneath your car. Don't worry about that. Next we have the black-eyed kids, paranormal creatures that will come to your home in the middle of the night and ask you to use your phone. Don't let them in because no one knows what happens if you do. They also do other creepy things like stalk you, and they're kids. Like that should be creepy enough for you. No one knows exactly what they are depending on who you ask. They're ghosts, they're demons, they're interdimensional fucking car salesmen, or they're even alien human hybrids. No one, take your pick on what they are. I don't know, I like interdimensional alien hybrid. According to a lot of my looking into it, these creatures became at least well known and popular. At least people that study them claim that they became known and popular around the mid to late 90s. But my first introduction to them was with the channel Fantastic Daily, who kind of admitted to making them up for a series that his whole channel was. So I don't know if Fantastic Daily was lying about making them up for his channel, or if the entire paranormal community is making up like stories about when they first started popping up in order to cover the fact that they were tricked by this guy that was obviously running like an internet TV show. Alright, so cow tipping is exactly that, and if you're from like middle of nowhere rural farm country like I am, you know what this one is. It's pretty simple. So you sneak up on a cow that's like sleep standing and you try to scare it and tip it over because it won't be able to get back up. I know it's kind of cruel, but like when you live in the middle of nowhere, there's not a lot else to do. The cow can get back up. Plus this isn't actually a thing, as cows only lightly nap when they're standing. They can get back up if they fall over. I don't know who said they couldn't. And cows weigh half a ton, so Josh from your biology class probably doesn't have the strength to knock old Bessie over. SlenderMan is arguably the poster child of creepypastas. Starting from the Something Awful forums post, he kind of took a life of his own very quickly. If you are on the internet, you don't know what SlenderMan is, I envy your innocence, but I'm about to ruin it. He is a tall, faceless creature in a suit with tentacles that will stalk his prey until eventually taking them, doing God knows what to them. It really all depends on what story you're listening to. And that's really what the basis for SlenderMan is it's sometimes he has a tentacle, sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes he only goes for kids, sometimes he'll take anyone and everyone. It really all depends on who you ask. Like, just Full stop. He was a really popular character in the 2010s, and I would go as far to say that he's the first, one of, if not the first, cryptid to come from the internet. But his popularity ultimately died down due to just kind of market oversaturation. And then obviously Hollywood came out with a big budget movie like a few years too late that wasn't very good. And then you had the incident where two high school girls stabbed their friend in order to appease SlenderMan. Yeah, that kind of like killed the whole thing for everyone. Thankfully the girl that was attacked did survive though. Hanako-San, or Tori no Hanako-San, which translates to Hanako of the Toilet, is a Japanese urban legend about a ghost girl named Hanako that haunts school bathrooms. There's a few different versions of the story. Some say that she was murdered by a parent or a stranger in the bathroom. Others say she took her life in the bathroom due to bullying. And then there's another one that says that she was killed in World War II during an air raid, and she just so happened to be hiding in the bathroom during a game of hide and seek. Now, Hanako is mostly a story told by kids to scare and dare each other into trying to summon her. You know, kind of like how we in the States do with like Bloody Mary. This very much is just like a Japanese version of that. Supposedly, to summon her, you go into the girls' bathroom on the 3rd floor of your school, knock on the 3rd stall, and ask for Hanako. What's said to happen is if she is there, you'll be pulled into the stall to be eaten or by a 3-headed lizard. The story has kind of evolved into like a pop culture thing in Japan, as Hanako has been made a part of manga, anime, and even got her own movie. And it also kind of reminds me of this like story we had at one of the high schools I went to in Texas. The legend went that the school's entire 3rd floor was shut down, which it was, but the legend went it was shut down because it was haunted by the spirit of a girl who had taken her own life in a bathroom on it. And it was even said that you could see her from 3rd floor windows outside, and you know you did see her because she had long black hair and wore all white. And you know, there was always the dare of like, oh, go up there and try to find her. I don't think anyone ever actually did though. I also don't think that like there was actually a ghost up on the 3rd floor that like Colonel Buck's cursed tomb. This is gonna need some context beforehand. So Colonel Buck was the founder of the town Bucksport, Maine, and it's said that in the early days of the town, the colonel had a witch burned or hanged, take your pick, but he had a woman killed. But before she died, she cursed Buck, claiming they would put a stone on his grave and her feet will mark it so that for all time people will know that he killed an innocent woman. A few decades after Buck had died, a monument was erected on his grave that bears a watermark in the shape of a woman's leg just below his name. I don't know if they have ever tried to clean the stain, but it is a fun small town story, and everything I read was from Bucksport's own websites, and it seems very much like they use this as like a tourist attraction. So I don't think they're gonna try to clean it. The Killer in the Backseat is a classic legend that actually has a moral to it. It first started circulating around the 60s. It's rather short, so I can just tell you a version of it. The story typically goes that a woman is traveling alone and stops at a diner to eat. There, a trucker tries to talk to her, but she blows him off because, you know, ew, he's a nasty, gross trucker man. But before she leaves the diner, the woman is called back in by a waitress over an issue with her payment. On her way out, the trucker stops her again and but she tells him like, hey, buzz off, like I'm not interested. The trucker then begins to follow her on the highway, constantly flashing his high beams at her. She gets panicked and scared, naturally, eventually causing her to pull over at a truck stop, and as she's running inside, the trucker stops her at gunpoint. It says to come to him. Now, obviously the woman is terrified, and she doesn't know. Instead of robbing her or anything, the trucker actually pushes her behind him and then pulls a man out of the backseat of her car and explains he saw the man crawl into her back seat when the woman went back inside the diner to fix the pay issue. And the trucker was flashing his high beams to keep the killer from attacking the woman while driving. And that's it. The moral of the story is don't judge a book by its cover, because that creepy trucker that you run into at a Love's might just save your life. Killer clowns is exactly what it sounds like. Everything I looked up pointed to the 2016 clown epidemic, where people were just kind of dressed as clowns for the sake of being scary. If you don't remember that, I envy your innocence. I remember I was in the military at the time, so I was living near Seattle, and we actually had a briefing about the clown and what to do if we saw one. For some reason, we weren't allowed to defend ourselves. We just had to observe, report, and run away. I've said it before. I'll say it again. This whole thing was a viral marketing stunt for the It reboot that got way out of hand, and Warner Brothers just kind of washed their hands of it and blamed it on internet hoaxsters. Killswitch is an urban legend game supposedly made by a Czechoslovakian gaming company. It's said to have only had 5,000 copies, and the game is unique that you can only do one playthrough, and afterwards it will delete itself from your computer. So the question of the legend is the game real? And if so, what did it look like? Some people claim that it was a 2-bit side-scroller. Other people have other weird explanations for it. I think there's actually a few fan games based on this idea too. The Monkeyman of New Dheli was a reported nuisance that harassed people on the streets of New Delhi, India back in 2001. The man was said to be 4 foot tall. It was a creature with red eyes. It had metal claws, a helmet, and rollerblades. And it would just attack people in the streets. The whole thing was chopped up to mass hysteria. But, I mean, in the end, 300 people reported sightings, 60 people got injured, and at least 2 died trying to hunt down the Monkey Man. I think they just saw like a little person on rollerblades and no one really knew what to make of it. Nain Rouge, whatever it is. It's a local legend from Detroit who's described to be a little red devil that causes all the city's misfortunes. And if you know anything about Detroit, they have a lot of misfortune. According to the legend, Detroit's founder, Antoine Cadillac, spoke with a fortune teller who told him he'd find the city and come across Nain, and that he should be kind to Nain. However, when Nain did appear to Cadillac, he hit the devil and told to get away. So now, as punishment, Nain cursed Cadillac to misfortune and haunts the city. It's said he's been behind the Battle of Bloody Run, where 58 British soldiers were killed by the Ottawa natives, and caused the surrender of Detroit during the War of 1812. So yeah, it's basically any issue you can think of, like what's wrong with Detroit, why is it the way it is, why has it been the way it is? Well, it was Nain's fault. And on the upside, I mean, the people of Detroit have fun with this at least. Like every year, they have a parade and chase Nain out of the city, and they end it with a bonfire. So, I mean, at least there's that. Like, at least they're making fun out of like their misfortune. Paul is Dead is a conspiracy theory that Paul McCartney of the Beatles had died in 1967 and was replaced by a body double. The story goes that one night while recording the album Sgt. Pepper, Paul got into an argument with the band members and stormed off. Driving like a madman, he got into an accident and lost his head. Literally. Paul was then replaced by an orphan named Billy Shears at the One Other Record Company because this was like the height of Beatlemania and they didn't want to stop milking that cow. But the band members weren't okay with it and chose to hide clues to what happened to him in their music. Supposedly there's clues and messages in album covers and songs thanks to backmasking. If you don't know what backmasking is, it's where you play music backwards and you'll hear a message. It's that thing evangelicals would use to say rock is the devil's music. You know, it's you play the Stairway to Heaven backwards and you'll hear words praise Satan. That's backmasking. Supposedly there's a lot of it within the White Album and Abbey Road, with backmasking lyrics being lines like Paul is dead man, I miss him, turn me on dead man, and I buried Paul. There's also hidden messages in the album cover of Abbey Road, including Paul being the only one that's barefoot and out of step with the others. John is in the front wearing white because he buried Paul. Ringo is in black because he gave a eulogy. You know, it's just one of those things. Make of this what you will. I know this is a really popular theory with Beatle fans. I personally don't care for the Beatles, but I do think that this is a fun little theory. It's just like a neat little thing to look into. Pukwudgis are small creatures from Native American folklore, and they live in Delaware. They're described as short, pudgy creatures standing around 2 feet tall, and they look like porcupines from the back and half goblin, half human things from the front. It's believed they used to actually get along with humans, but don't now due to the natives' love for a mushop, another native legend, and will use their magic powers to play tricks on humans, including, you know, it's harmless thing, you know, harmless little pranks. It's nothing too crazy. It's just pushing people off cliffs, kidnapping them, and pocket sand. It's believed that they have magic powers and can transform into animals and shoot fireballs, and overall should be avoided if seen. So maybe don't go and hug that porcupine. Actually, wait, would Sonic technically be considered a Pukwudgie? Sonic's a Pukwudgie. Shotgun Man is an urban legend from the Italian neighborhoods of Chicago. The killer was believed to be an assassin for the Black Hand around 1910 and to have taken at least 15 people's lives. Even though there were several witnesses to a lot of these killings, no one came and reported who did it over fear of the mafia, and it's not even sure if it was one person, and I couldn't find any more on this than that. It was just one assassin or a ring of assassins for the mafia in Chicago, which it's Chicago, like that's kind of part of their thing. Teke Teke is a Japanese urban legend. She is a ghost of a schoolgirl who was cut in half by a train after falling on the tracks, and because of this she became a vengeful spirit who now haunts urban areas, specifically train stations. She's a vengeful spirit, and if encountered she will chase you and cut you in half with a scythe. Where she got the scythe, I don't know, but she has a scythe. There's another version of the story that says she'll appear in train station bathrooms, and if encountered, she'll ask you where her legs are. If you give an answer that she doesn't like, she'll just rip your legs off and take them. However, if you tell her her legs are at the Meshin Expressway, she'll leave you be. This is another one of those stories similar to the one mentioned earlier, where it's pretty popular and has kind of gained more of a pop culture status. I mean, there's a few movies, I'm pretty sure there's a few manga and anime based on Teke Teke also. The Vanishing Lady, also known as the Vanishing Hotel Room, is a legend that dates back to the late 1800s. The gist of the story is a woman and her mother travel to Paris for an expo. After checking into their hotel, the mother falls ill. The woman then goes to get medicine for her mother, and upon return, her mom is gone, and everyone from the hotel staff to the police begin to gaslight the woman into believing her mother was never there and they never even checked into the hotel room. In fact, they didn't even have reservations at the hotel to begin with. And it ends with her mother never being seen again. There are a few variations of this story. Some say the woman never finds her mother and is committed to a mental institution. Others say her mom died of the Black Plague and the police hid her body to keep the public from panicking. And then some say that, you know, the police actually helped her investigate and found that the hotel was like human trafficking or organ trafficking or something like that. Take your pick, they were just bad people. Now, there was some questioning of the validity of this for quite a few years. I mean, it was circulated like it was a real story in papers like the New York Times, but others also told it like it was a funny, fun story just to write in the papers. It really all depends, but as far as I know, there was no actual evidence of this ever happening. It was just unfortunately written like a real story. The Flatwoods Monster is a creature reported in Flatwoods, West Virginia in 1952, and just the first of many creatures we will talk about from West Virginia. Seriously, if I got $1 for every West Virginian cryptid and Japanese schoolgirl ghost on this thing, I'd probably have like $10. So the story goes that in September of 1952, two boys and their friends saw bright lights in the sky before crashing into a local farm. The boys went home, grabbed their mother along with a few others, including a cop or a soldier, was one of the two, to go investigate the crash. Upon searching, the group found a large green figure with a red head and wearing a hood that gave it an Ace of Spades look, and it was said to be more robotic than organic and gave off a putrid smell. Police and reporters investigated the area but found nothing. They didn't even find a crash site. But that didn't stop this from being the town's big thing, and even today they take pride in this monster visiting them. They have statues, museums, and even a festival showing off depictions of the Flatwoods Monster. Some say it was an alien, others say it was an owl. Take your pick. I don't know, West Virginia is a weird place. They have a lot of weird stuff there. Reptilians, or lizard people, are a conspiracy theory that's kind of complex and a very dangerous rabbit hole to go down because you will get into some really weird places. The idea gets into hollowed earth and Agartha and goes really deep, but it's thought that there's a society of lizard people that live underground and are capable of shape-shifting and have begun slowly sneaking into and taking over our world. There's a lot of conspiracy theories related to that one letter claiming to have a lot of high-ranking members of society that are lizard people, including Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, the Clintons, the royal family, and just about every prominent politician from all over the world over the last 40 years or so. This one is some like Alex Jones levels of crazy because they are in fact the ones turning the frogs gay. Be wary of the lizard people. So Bigfoot and Yeti are tied into one entry, which is kind of perfect to me because I believe that they are related. And everything I'm going to say about Bigfoot, just know it also relates to the Yeti. So the oldest story, at least what I always heard about Bigfoot, was he is the supposed missing link between man and monkey in terms of evolution, and said to be reside somewhere in the Pacific Northwest of the United States of Canada, whereas the Yeti is somewhere in the Himalayas. While sightings go back years, like as far back as Native Americans, even there was no concrete evidence of Bigfoot until the Patterson-Gimlin film, which is that famous footage of Bigfoot which the creators have maintained was real up until their deaths. And there's been several sightings and footprints found of Bigfoot over the years, but no solid physical evidence has ever been proven. Now the Yeti has a very similar appearance, though it's white, not brown, and has had several sightings, with the most recent being by soldiers of the Indian Army back in 2019, which found very large footprints. Now if you ask me, these creatures are related, just different evolutionary variants of the same creature. Think kind of like, you know, you have like a German Shepherd and like a Chihuahua. They're both dogs, but they're just different versions of dogs. That's what Bigfoot and Yeti are to me. They're both Sasquatch. They're just different versions of Sasquatch. And if you ask me, Bigfoot has also been dead for a very long time. I've always seen the Bigfoot spot in the Patterson-Gimlin film as one of, if not the last of its species. There's also a theory that Patterson and Gimlin slaughtered them all, but I don't think that there's a lot of evidence that counters that, and so like it's just like hearsay makeup by people that are coping. But in reality, yes, most of the Bigfoot have died off from any number of reasons, and that one Patty was one of, if not the last ones. As for the Yeti, it may have died out years ago or is still out there. I honestly don't care enough about Yetis to look into it. It's just winter Bigfoot. That's all it is. The Locness Monster, or Nessie, is a sea monster that lives in Loch Ness in Scotland. No one really knows if Nessie is there, as the loch is massive and goes around 800 feet deep. There's been some radar scans of the loch in an effort to disprove Nessie, but all it did was prove that Nessie was there, then disprove it. And it's Nessie. Everyone knows who Nessie is. She's our underwater ally. Everyone knows her and loves her. Next is the Night Marchers, and they are probably the coolest legend I've ever seen so far on this. They're part of native Hawaiian culture and said to be the ghost of native armies that come out during nights honoring ancient gods like Kane, Kun, and Lono. They march from the ocean and proceed to battlefields and sacred sites with nothing stopping them. The legend says that if you lay eyes on them, you try to stop them, or show disrespect to the army, you'll be met with a very violent end, and the only way to survive is to lay on the ground and show respect and fear to the army. Then they will pass. It's also said that if you have an ancestor in the army and they spot you, the army will pass you without doing any harm. And this is just like a really cool legend. I don't know, like it's just something about it's like, that's badass. Like just ghost army that walks around because it can. So we're moving from Native Hawaiian legends to Native American legends with the Skinwalkers. Skinwalkers originate from Navajo culture and are said to be shape-shifting witches that will often turn themselves into animals, typically coyotes. It's weird because Skinwalkers are super well known, but not a lot is actually known about them, past just being evil shapeshifters, as the Navajo don't like talking about it. And honestly, if it doesn't come from a member of the tribe, I would not trust what you hear about these creatures, because it's probably just someone making something up to like embellish the story. And apparently, from my understanding, the tribe doesn't like talking about this because they still very, very firmly believe in Skinwalkers, and talking about them will make them more likely to come to you. And this is not something to take, this is not like a story that's taken lightly by the tribe either. I remember I had a buddy who was born and raised on the reservation, pure-blooded Navajo, and whenever anyone brought up Skinwalkers to him, he would get quiet and say, "We don't talk about that," and try to change the subject. So I don't want to go any more in depth with this because I don't want to lie to people about what these things are, because I can't give a full answer to what they are. The skunk ape, it's just Florida's Bigfoot, and there's not much else to it. It is literally just Bigfoot's cousin that vibes out in the Everglades, and I want to go hunt him. The Melon Heads is a weird legend from the United States, specifically Ohio, Connecticut, and Michigan, which all have their own slight variations. They all claim the Melon Heads are children with weird shaped and warped heads similar to something like Squidward from SpongeBob. Most of the stories say they were orphans that were living in or near an asylum that went feral due to abuse and neglect, resulting in them running off into the woods and attacking anyone who crossed them. But the Ohio version is different and says a doctor had fostered the children in his care and experimented on them and turned them into Melon Heads until they escaped, and they now live in the woods and eat babies. there's a lot of baby eating with a lot of these creatures. The Bandaged Man of Cannon Beach is a legend from Oregon of, well, a bandaged man. So the story started back in the 50s, and from everything I found, it seems to be that it was a lumberjack that was injured and died at work, but not before being covered in bandages, and now haunts his favorite place in the area, Cannon Beach. He's said to haunt the beach and a stretch of highway, harassing drivers and beachgoers alike. Some even say that he eats people and small animals. Apparently, pets that go missing around the beach are often found half-eaten, and this is blamed on the Bandaged Man. So if you're near this beach in Oregon, be careful and watch out for the smell of rotting flesh. Finally, getting away from cryptids for a bit, we have Barbara O'Brien's Operators. So Barbara O'Brien is the pseudonym for a woman who had a mental break in the 1950s, which she then went to write about in a book called Operator and Things, The Inner Life of the Schizophrenic. In the book, she describes the operators as indistinguishable from humans, with the difference being operators have psychic powers and have a whole culture centered around making the non-psychic stuffer. A lot of people, Barbara herself, determine the operators are metaphors and manifestations of her mental breakdown and are just a metaphor for what she saw and dealt with in 1950s office culture as a woman in that time. However, I'm sure there are some people that think that's not the case and that these are real things, but it's coming from the author herself, who, again, like, it's just a very interesting way to write about the issues she dealt with in the time she lived in. Cropsey is an urban legend from Staten Island area of New York from around the 80s that actually turned out to be true. According to the legend, Cropsey was an escaped patient from a local mental institution that shut down in the area. Cropsey would abduct and kill children in said institution, and it was, and thought that was it. It was just a story that parents and older siblings told to kids to scare them into being safe. Then it turned out to be kind of true. The real Cropsey was a man named Andre Rant. He was a janitor at the local institution in the area who was convicted of kidnapping and the murder of a 12-year-old girl and believed to have been guilty of the murder of 4 other children in the area. And he was actually found living in a camp near the institution shortly after it had shut down. Goodey Cole was a woman from Ipswich, Massachusetts, and was thoroughly believed to be a witch by the locals. So much so that she was charged with witchcraft 3 times. It's thought that she sank a boat with a cyclone because members of the crew insulted her, and she would turn into various flying creatures like bats and owls. And she even turned a woman's baby into an imp. It got better though. She was eventually found guilty and executed, making her the only woman in New Hampshire to be executed of witchcraft in the state. And that's where her story begins, as the locals were scared to give her a proper funeral, so they threw her in an unmarked grave that to this day no one really knows the location of, but not before driving a stake into her heart and attaching a horseshoe to it to ensure that she was dead. Why they attached a horseshoe, I don't know. Reasons. Then in 1938, Goodey was posthumously exonerated of her charges, and that's where the weird starts. Shortly after, locals start reporting seeing an old woman wandering the streets at night and the early mornings. When asked what she was doing, the woman would simply reply that she's looking for Goodey's grave. A copy even reported stopping her, and she claimed to have been searching for it for hundreds of years. And while there is a memorial for her in the town now, I don't know if she can still be seen. Everything I read said that the ghost disappeared around 1968, but yeah. Hopefully Goodey Cole has peace now. Don't haunt me. So Clinton Road is a road in rural New Jersey that is said to be the site of the paranormal, Satanism, occults, witches, and just about everything else. But the worst thing is there's a traffic light there that can take up to 5 minutes to change. Some of the legends in the area include that of the ghost of the Boy Bridge. It's said that if you go to one of the bridges at Dead Man's Curve and place a quarter between the yellow lines at midnight, it will be returned by the ghost of a boy who fell from the bridge and drowned. Other versions say the boy will push you into the river to save you from being hit by a car like he was. There's also a ghost Camaro that can be seen driven by a girl who was killed in an accident on the road, as well as the ghost of park rangers near one of the campgrounds. Others claim you can and will be chased by ghost headlights until you're off the road. There was also a castle built near the road in 1905, but it was long abandoned, and people who have gone there have reported weird visions and bruises. Not to mention, before it was torn down, people found satanic symbols in and around it, but that might just have been like teenagers being edgy. So if you, for whatever reason, God knows why, decide you want to go to New Jersey, there's some paranormal stuff you can look into. Also, I'm sure the Jersey Devil lives out there. Who knows? Sheepsquatch. It's like Bigfoot, but part sheep. And guess where it's from? West Virginia. The legend goes that some women were returning home from a family reunion on a snowy day when they came across a large 8-foot-tall creature covered in white hair with human-like legs and a sheep's head and horns like a ram. So apparently the Sheepsquatch was scared of them and ran off into the woods. The women, being smart and obviously seeing a few horror movies, didn't pursue it and instead just ran home. There's not a set backstory on how it came to be, and honestly, Sheepsquatch is just a blanket term in the area for large, unknown white creatures seen in the woods. But the vagueness of the creature and its legend and like depiction didn't stop this third string cryptid from being featured in Fallout 76. So at least it's got being featured in like one of the worst MMOs ever made. So HIV Attacks was a bit of a panic/internet rumor from the 90s. It was chain emails sent around telling stories of how people would go to places like clubs and movie theaters only to feel a slight prick at some point. You know, they'd ignore it. It was like whatever, just, you know, slight pinch. And they'd later find a note slid into their pocket saying, "Welcome to the AIDS Club." This was just a chain email scary story, and there's no reported evidence of this actually happening. And there's a lot of stories similar to this that we're going to get into later on. 10% of the brain is that old theory that we only use 10% of our brain, and if we used all of it, we'd get psychic powers and basically become Superman. We would also have like our third eye open. Take your pick on what would happen. It's not true. I mean, I'm pretty sure scientists determine that we use just about all of our brain, whether it be consciously or subconsciously. So, sorry to break it to you. So the Lincoln Kennedy coincidences is just a list of weird connections between the two that goes past both them being assassinated. Both were shot by men that were known by 3 names, if you believe Oswald did it. Both were elected to Congress in a year that ended in 46. Both were elected president in a year that ended in 60. And both were shot in the head on Friday. Both cared about civil rights and were in their 30s when they married a woman in their 20s. And both their successors were Southerners named Johnson. Both their successors were born in a year ending in 08. And both shooters were killed before they could stand trial. Again, all the shooter stuff is based on if you believe that Oswald shot Kennedy. He did it. This is a bunch of weird conspiracies though. It's kind of wild to think there's that many connections between, you know, the last 2 presidents that were assassinated. Coca-Cola dissolves teeth is the first parents making stuff up legend we have, and it's exactly that. Parents would tell kids that Coke rots and dissolves teeth in an effort to get them to not drink it so much. If you ask me, there's some truth to this based on, you know, like no one really knows fully what they put into Coke. And I've seen it eat carbon off of the bolt of a rifle, so only God knows what it will actually do to your teeth. It's definitely not good for you. Home Invader poses as a clown statue. This is a classic urban legend that I'll give a quick synopsis of. The story goes that a teenage girl is hired to babysit a couple kids while the parents go out to dinner. After the kids are put to bed, the girl goes to watch TV and gets an uncomfortable feeling from a clown statue the family has in the living room. Eventually the father calls to check out how everything is going. The girl says it's fine and the kids are asleep, but asks if she can cover the clown statue as it's giving her the creeps. The father replies they don't have a clown statue and to get out of the house. It, however, was too late for the girl, as once she hangs up the phone, the clown strikes and kills her. The end. It's a fun little campfire story, you know, it's a nice thing to scare people with. Corpse in the water tank is one I really couldn't find a whole lot on as to like what the legend was, as everything I looked up like went back to the Elisa Lam case. If you don't know, Elisa Lam was a woman who was on vacation in LA and was last seen in the elevator of the Hotel Cecil in the city before disappearing. She was found sometime later in a water tank after residents complained of a foul taste and odor of the water, and her case was very strange as there was a lot of questions on how this woman got into the water tank. There's also a lot of like really mean rumors out there. She was a woman that, if I'm not mistaken, she had bipolar disorder and just kind of had an episode and wound up in the tank somehow, and people were not nice about her for some reason. Drugs and Halloween candy is what it sounds like. Every year you see people post online about how they found everything from crack to fentanyl to a carburetor and even Jimmy Hoffa's pelvis in their kids' Halloween candy. I don't think this has ever actually happened. Fatal Fair is a Japanese legend that roughly goes as follows. A cab driver is hailed by a woman who looks distraught and needs a ride. Once in the cab, the woman will ask to go somewhere and the driver has never heard of, but she reassures him and offers directions. The drive is very long, full of twists and turns, and goes through multiple towns, and the cab driver gets a little annoyed but thinks, hey, at least it's going to be a good payday, so it's okay. Then she eventually takes him out to the country, causing the driver to look back and ask where they're going. The woman replies, "You'll find out soon," before disappearing. The cab driver is then shocked and turns around to realize he's about to drive off a cliff and is barely able to stop in time. And that's the story. There's some that think that the woman, when alive, was trying to get a cab to her dying daughter in the hospital, but the driver didn't take the sense of urgency seriously, and the woman wasn't able to see her daughter before death. The woman was so distraught and she jumped off the cliff that she now lures cab drivers to as a form of revenge. It's kind of weird that Japan has a whole legend dedicated to like, yeah, we're just gonna mess with cab drivers. Bunyip is an Aboriginal myth from Australia. I know, surprisingly, they have their own mythical creatures with all the weird shit in Australia, but they do. The creature comes from the Aboriginals, like I said. It's said to be a water spirit and there's no real agreed description of it. Some say it's a water dog type seal creature, others say it's a small creature with a long neck and small heads, and there are some drawings of it that make it look like a capybara and a hippo. There's also various reports of how dangerous it is. Some tribes would claim that it's just another animal that lives on and in the river eating crawfish, while others say it eats people. And no one knows where exactly the story originated from, as almost every tribe has its own story of the Bunyip, but it is a creature you could potentially run into in the outback. The Mongolian deathworm is essentially the Alaskan bullworm. It's big, it's hairy, and it's pink, and it travels like the desert of Mongolia, eating people. It's a massive worm that was believed to be in the Gobi Desert, traveling under the sand, and can shoot venom from a distance and electrocute people if it's touched. For the longest time, this was thought to be a real thing. Like, everyone just kind of agreed, like, yeah, there's like a giant worm monster in Mongolia. That was until 1983 when natives were shown a desert boa and they all collectively claimed, like, yeah, no, that's the Mongolian deathworm. Next we have doll that grows human hair. I don't know if this is about a very specific story or just like a weird urban legend, but I did find the story of Okiku, a Japanese doll that grows hair, so I'm just going to talk about that. The story of Okiku is she belonged to a girl of the same name that tragically died at an early age, and her family put the doll in the family shrine. And after a while, they noticed that the doll's hair began growing and assumed her spirit latched onto the doll, and it was her way of communicating. From what I was able to find, she's not an evil spirit, she just didn't want to let go of her doll. Okiku's family even eventually gave the doll to a local shrine where it is today, and the priests still regularly take care of and cut the doll's hair, and it's there on display. I'm sure you can go see it if you ask nicely enough. Our first full-on creepypasta for this whole shebang is Cul-de-sac, which is, it's one I thought I had never heard of, but it turns out it's just the Edda and Eddie theory creepypasta. You know, the one that says the cul-de-sac is purgatory and the kids, aside from the Cankers, lived on the land at some point and died in various ways over the last 100 years or so. This was a pretty popular pasta, and if I'm not mistaken, at least based on memory, my experience, it was the first creepypasta I ever saw. It was also kind of popularized the cartoons from your childhood are actually darker than you remember trend that happened in the whole creepypasta community for a while. You know, things like SpongeBob and the Seven Deadly Sins, or Angelica and the Rugrats as a crack baby who imagined all the babies. This was kind of the one that started that whole sense. So Baba Yaga is a Russian legend that scared kids in the Soviet bloc for years. She's a witch who rides a pot and steals her victims, usually children, to cook and eat them. She's a story Eastern European parents tell their kids to get them to behave, kind of like the Boogey Man or La Llorona. I couldn't really find a whole lot else on it. I mean, I'm sure there's various different stories. I'd imagine there are. Gashadokuro? Yeah, Gashadokuro is a Japanese legend of a giant skeleton made of smaller skeletons of those that died in battle, and it's believed it's invincible and will wander the land eating people until the anger that caused it to appear is resolved. One of the first stories of the Gashadokuro, I'm gonna mispronounce the hell out of this thing, it dates back to the 10th century where a samurai named Masakoto launched a successful rebellion capturing the Shimotsuke and Kozuke provinces, but Kyoto didn't recognize Masakado as the new emperor of the region and placed a bounty on his head. Two men named Setamori and Hidesato would go on to kill Masakado and take his head back to Kyoto to claim the bounty, which upset Masakado's daughter, who also happened to be a powerful witch. His daughter would then unleash the first Gashadokuro made of Masakado's soldiers on Kyoto until his head was returned to what is now Tokyo. I'm not gonna lie, I think this is a pretty cool legend, and I'm shocked it hasn't been adapted into media more. This seems like it would be right at home in things like anime or manga, but I mean, yeah, from everything I could find, it's got like 2 or 3 adaptations, not a whole lot. On the upside though, it has become an SCP and it's classified as a Keter. So at least there's that. Like, there's some people recognize that it's also cool. It's also weird to me that like the Japanese have these, you know, their legends go from one of two things. It is either young woman who was wronged in life and now will kill everyone, or giant otherworldly ending being that cannot be stopped. There is no, it's either Japanese schoolgirl or apocalyptic monster. There is no middle ground with Japanese ghosts. It's one of my favorite parts about their like urban legends and culture. Shadow people are creatures people claim to see in the dark, staring at them just out of the corner of their eye, and no one knows if they're malevolent or not. Some people even think they're interdimensional beings. I'm not going to get into more detail on this one because later on we have a specific shadow person that's going to get talked about, and I'm going to talk about them in that. But just think back to a time when you woke up in the middle of the night and felt like someone was standing over you, or you looked in the corner of your room and could have sworn someone was in it and staring at you. Like, not just staring at you, but staring into your soul. That's a shadow person. The McMinville UFO photos are some of the most credible UFO photos out there, and they are just kind of forgotten about for years because the news lost them. The two photos were taken by Paul and Evelyn Trent on their farm in Oregon, who initially thought it was a military aircraft and didn't want any trouble, so they didn't really make that big a deal about them. They eventually got their negatives back, and you know, people have debated the legitimacy of their photos. Believers say that these photos are legit and solid concrete evidence of proof of the, you know, an unedited 3D solid flying object being photographed. Skeptics say that whatever is photographed is just a model on a wire that they hung from the telephone wire. I don't know. I want to say they're real. It might be some weird military test project. I don't know. You're going to see the photos here. Tell me what you think of the McMinville UFO photos and whether or not you think they're legit. So the Devil's Tower is a butte in the Black Hills National Park in Wyoming. It was actually the first U.S. national monument made by Teddy Roosevelt, believe it or not. I'm not 100% sure on what legend specifically it's talking about. The most I could find on it was that a lot of the Native Americans deem that this land is sacred, so I'll kind of talk about that. A lot of the Plains tribes from the area call it the Bear's Teepee, as there were a lot of bears living there and they believed in the Great Spirit, placed the mountain there for a reason that varies from tribe to tribe. The Crow and Cheyenne also have stories of children being attacked by the Great Bear spirits for trespassing onto the land. So to not anger the Great Bear, if you do go, please be respectful. Hello, Mishka. Be respectful to the land. Are you done? Yes, hello. I don't know why the Hello Kitty murder is on here. It was a real thing where a woman from Hong Kong was brutally tortured and murdered. The case gets its name because her killers put her head in a Hello Kitty doll, but yeah, I don't know why this is on here. The upside is the people who did this to her did face the legal system and were arrested. Boyscout Lane is a road in central Wisconsin that's haunted by, well, Boy Scouts. The legend goes that a group of Boy Scouts died on this road. Some versions of the story say they were murdered by their scoutmaster, others say they were murdered by the bus driver, others say the bus crashed or it was a forest fire. Hell, one says they just vanished. People who have been on the road claim to feel like they're being watched. They hear twigs snap, footsteps, strange lights, phantom buses, and even handprints on their windows. My understanding from looking into it, it's a private road now, you can't exactly go down it, but it is like just a weird little legend, and there's no actual evidence that Boy Scouts ever died or went missing there, so I don't know how this legend came to be. Ghouls are human-like creatures of Arabic folklore that are said to haunt graveyards and feed on human flesh, and that's the gist of what they are. Now, there are specific tales like that of the mother ghoul who is said to lure children to her home so she can eat them, or that of the shapeshifter who will lead travelers and children to abandoned areas so it can eat them, take their money, and even disguise themselves as their victims. Take your guess at what they are. I mean, they're undead. They're kind of like zombies, but a bit more sentient. I would say this is like a prototype zombie. Jeff the Killer is one of, if not the worst creepypasta that was ever written, and back in the early 2010s, for some reason, we all collectively agreed it was a masterpiece and terrifying. If you have somehow never experienced it and want to, for whatever reason, subject yourself to this god-awful story, Internet historian Sundance Rejects on it is the best way to experience the story. I'm not joking. He does not deviate from it. Just, if you're gonna want to like read or listen to the story, just go do Internet Historian's version of it. So next is Kagome Kagome. I don't know if this is talking about the creepypasta, the ritual legend in the creepypasta, or both. So I'll talk about both, because unlike Jeff the Killer, this is a good story. So the creepypasta is about Nazi scientists in World War II conducting an experiment on orphans in Japan in an attempt to find immortality by turning off what they call an internal kill switch. It's weird Nazi pseudoscience stuff. So if you're into weird World War II conspiracies and like shit like that, like I am, go give this one a read, as it's written in a very believable way. It's more of an after the fact like rumor thing. It doesn't actually focus or humanize any of the Germans. It's just more like, yeah, this is like another one of those weird things the Germans did. Look at it. The legend at the end of it goes as follows. If you go to Hiroshima, go around the woods and you may find some dirt trails there. If you travel down them, you will see beautiful forests, but if you travel down one that has signs of trucks going through, you will feel cold, and you will see that a lot of trees are cut down. But don't wander from the path. If you pay attention, you will notice that the tree stumps look like kneeling people missing heads. If you continue, the air will get cold. Eventually you will reach a clearing with an old stone building in the center, vines covering the place. As soon as you open the door, a foul smell will come out, similar to that of a rotting corpse. If you look down the hall, it will be dark regardless of the time of day, since there are no lights. Continue down the hall, take the first left, and then go down the hall until you see one door that appears to be made out of a red colored wood. The rest are brown. Open the door and you will find 10 happy children and caretakers, all wearing kimonos, playing in a normal playroom. One girl is missing her arm, another is missing his forehead, and a third lacks a jaw. But all are bandaged with clinical precision. This place should be very clean and tidy, dependent on your standards of such things, and well lit. At once, your presence will draw the attention of everyone in the room, including the ones that look far too preoccupied or distracted. They will turn to look at you, carefree smiles from each of their pleasant faces. The head caretaker, in all of her beauty, will ask, "Will you come play with us?" If you say no, the door will slam shut on you. And if you try to go down the hallways out the exit, you will only find another dark hallway. Open any of the brown doors and you should find operating tables or bunk beds. If you continue down the third hallway, you will realize a girl is standing several meters behind you, her face shrouded by shadow. Approach it and expect your doom. Continue down the hallway and try not to let her catch up with you. If you say yes, however, you will be welcomed into the room. The door will close behind you, and everyone will form a circle around you. "Now sit and don't flinch," a cheerful voice will say. "Just follow the instructions and you will survive." All of the light will disappear from the room, yet you can see the circle of children, each with vicious expressions on their faces. Ones so vile you will probably flinch straight up. If you can stomach that throw, they will begin to move around and around you slowly. You may feel one of them lash towards you. If you look, however, there will be nothing there, besides the children circling normally. If that wasn't enough, they will begin to chant, "Kagome, Kagome." If you flinch before they chant, they simply continue as normal. If you choose to say maybe to the head caretaker or anything other than yes or no, it is told that the children's expression will turn mortified and they will scream in inhuman voices, "Decide, decide." If you do anything besides say yes or no from there, it is told that the children and caretakers will slam the door on you. If you turn around, the story varies. Supposedly, your worst fear will be waiting for you at the other end of the hallway, separating you from your exit. The least you can do is greet the creature before he tears you into oblivion. as you will die as a polite person. Don't greet him, and you will end up as another one of the beheaded bodies along the trail. If you respond, I don't understand, and you must be genuine, the head caretaker will say, go to your school and watch your children play. You should understand then. Nothing will have changed, and close the door on your way out. It's just polite. And that's the story of Kagome Kagome, at least the legend of it. Yeah, this one kind of really freaked me out as a kid because I was like, oh god, well I'm not going to Hiroshima anytime soon because that's kind of fucking terrifying. Fun little story, kind of creepy. Hope you like my creepypasta narration voice. Next we have Walt Disney was a weird dude and he had a lot of weird beliefs. And when he died, he had himself frozen and is entombed under Disney World. I'm not joking. This conspiracy has been around for years and years, and I don't know where this story originated from because it doesn't matter how you look it up. All you get is articles saying, no, Walt Disney isn't cryogenically frozen under the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, which is very specific, like super specific. Why, like, you did not have to drop a very specific, like, ride, because now I just think he is under that ride. This theory gets so widespread and so many people believe it that there's actually a second conspiracy that says the only reason Disney made the movie Frozen was so when people look up the words Disney and Frozen, they get the movie and nothing about Walt Disney being frozen under the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, which because you all keep wanting to say he's under the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, it makes me think he's not under the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, he's actually under a tiny world and like his thing is maintained by the little children that operate the rides there. The Boogey Man is one of the oldest and probably most difficult things to explain because everyone had a family member tell them about the Boogey Man, and I guarantee you that everyone has a different version of this creature. Like, my version of it is he's a monster under the bed and in the closet that will eat you if you get out of bed after bedtime. And I'm sure there's someone out there who will tell me that that's not the Boogey Man and give me their own version. Why every parent across the world unanimously decided to use this monster to scare children into going to sleep, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure it's why I have trust issues. So Sinbad's Shazam is a side effect of the Mandela effect, which is something that's going to be talked about later on. A lot of people online are convinced that the actor Sinbad starred in a kids movie about a genie named Shazam sometime in the early 90s, and everyone just thought it was real and wanted to watch it. It's one of those things, I'm pretty sure they started on like Reddit or 4chan, one of the two. Most people chop it up to misremembering a movie called Kazam that starred Shaq, but people that believe in Shazam say they remember watching both. And those that did watch it said that Shazam was actually better than Kazam, and Kazam was just a cheap knockoff. It probably also doesn't help that Sinbad also did a skit dressed as a genie in the 90s, so this misremembering may be from that. And there's absolutely no evidence of this movie ever existing because it's not real. Sinbad also said it's not real, and he never did that. And to be honest with you, I think the man would remember being in a movie he made at the height of his career. Unfavorable Semicircle was a YouTube channel that caused a lot of questions for people that saw it. The channel immediately started uploading several videos which mostly consisted of 5 seconds, a man saying a letter or number, a black background, and the Sagittarius symbol was in the title. The channel was deleted about 20 days after it was created, and which made people ask more questions. Theories began, the most popular being it's an ARG. Others included that it was aliens, a number station, or a recruitment thing similar to that of Cicada 3301, and just about anything else you can think of. There was a subreddit dedicated to finding out what this was, but from my looking into it, it seemed to be dead as of now, which with, just leads going cold. Also, all that information I just said about it, I get from that subreddit, so shout out to those people for actually looking into this because they have nothing better to do with their spare time. So this next one has a bit of an info warning. If you're super paranoid about being susceptible to something just by hearing of it, skip this one. There should be something tab somewhere. This is also the last entry for tier 1, so if you don't want to hear this one, just go ahead and skip to tier 2. So the solar plexus clown glider is a broad term used to describe the creature that will infect and corrupt you by going through the solar plexus chakra. It's so powerful that just hearing the name is said to make you susceptible to it. The solar plexus is a chakra in Hindu belief. It's said to contain both positive and negative emotions, and it can be corrupted. However, the term solar plexus also wasn't used until New Age healers in the 80s, so I wasn't able to find out what like the actual Hindus call it. The legend itself can be traced back to chainmail from the 90s. Basically, you hear it, and if you get attacked, your life will become miserable. Also, on the Obscure Legend Wiki, under Manifestations, they have Jeffrey Epstein was killed in a Burlington coat factory. What did they mean by that? Okay, so that's it. This is part 1. This is probably going to be a 3 to 5 part series. More than likely. It really all depends, because I like going in depth with a lot of these, as you can see. If you sat through it this far, hey, thanks. Like, that's really cool. Subscribe, leave a like, I don't know, comment, tell me what you thought of like some of the theories, and like, not theories, legends, and like what I got wrong about them. We just passed 500 subscribers. That's really cool. Thank you for that. That's really cool. I didn't think that many people wanted to sit there and listen to me ramble incoherently, but I appreciate it. I recently put up a poll asking if anyone would be interested in doing a Q&A. It was, so yeah, I mean, if you want to do that, the post with the rules to that and where questions can be submitted will probably be posted shortly after this video. So if you just want to do that, and by shortly I mean like an hour or two after this gets posted. That was probably going to be the next video, and then it's going to be, you know, part 2 of this. And then I kind of want to dig in, like do a bit more in depth with some of these urban legends. I've got a whole list of like some videos I want to talk about. Yeah, if you like this, thank you. I hope you have a good day and you're doing all right. Follow me on social media. I love you. Bye bye.